Maya pressed her face against the cold glass window of Romano's bistro, her breath creating small clouds that quickly disappeared. The warm golden light spilled out onto the sidewalk where she stood, illuminating the faces of families sharing meals together. Her stomach cramped with a familiar ache that had become her constant companion over the past 3 months. The last real meal she'd eaten was 2 days ago when a construction worker had given her half of his lunch sandwich. Now at 17, she stood on the rain-soaked streets of downtown Portland, her worn sneakers developing new holes with each passing day. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The autumn wind cut through Maya's thin denim jacket like a blade. She pulled her knit beanie lower over her tangled auburn hair, trying to trap whatever warmth she could. People hurried past her on the busy sidewalk, their umbrellas creating a moving canopy above their heads. They clutched their phones and briefcases, lost in their own worlds, rarely glancing down at the thin girl who had become part of the street furniture. Maya remembered when she used to walk these same streets with purpose, heading to Riverside Academy where she'd been one of their most promising students. That felt like another lifetime now, before everything collapsed around her like a house of cards. Before her foster mother Patricia decided that 18 was close enough to adulthood and that she could no longer afford to keep Maya. Before the state assistance ran out and Maya found herself with nowhere to go except the unforgiving streets of the city. The smell of fresh bread and roasted garlic drifted from Romano's kitchen, making Maya's mouth water involuntarily. She counted the crumpled bills in her jacket pocket for the 100th time that day. $3.47. Not nearly enough for even the cheapest item on the menu visible through the window. She had tried panhandling earlier, but most people avoided eye contact or told her to get a job, as if it were that simple for someone with no address, no phone, and clothes that hadn't been properly washed in weeks. Through the restaurant window, Maya could see families laughing over steaming plates of pasta. Children her younger brother's age sat in high chairs, dropping food carelessly on the floor, food that would have been a feast to her now. A businessman in an expensive suit complained loudly to the waitress that his soup was too cold, sending it back without a second thought. Maya watched him with a mixture of envy and disbelief. If only he knew how many people would have been grateful for that soup at any temperature. She spotted something in the corner of the restaurant that made her heart skip. An old upright piano sat neglected against the far wall, its dark wood finish dulled with age and neglect. Sheet music was scattered across the top, and a small sign read "Live Music Fridays." Maya's fingers twitched involuntarily, muscle memory awakening from months of dormancy. She hadn't touched piano keys since her last recital at Riverside Academy, where she had performed Rachmaninoff's Prelude in C-sharp minor to thunderous applause from parents and teachers alike. Mrs. Chen, her piano instructor, had called her gifted. She had talked about scholarships to prestigious music schools, about a future filled with concert halls and recording contracts. Maya had practiced 4 hours every day, her fingers dancing across the keys with the precision of someone much older than her years. Music had been her escape from the uncertainty of foster care, her constant companion through 7 different homes and 12 different schools. But that was before Patricia's financial troubles. Before the eviction notice. Before Maya aged out of the system 3 months early and found herself sleeping in doorways and under bridges. Her dreams of Juilliard and Carnegie Hall seemed like cruel jokes now. Her fingers, once soft and nimble from hours of practice, were now rough and cool-used from trying to survive on the streets. Maya stepped back from the window as a well-dressed couple approached the restaurant entrance. She didn't want to be seen as threatening or desperate, even though desperation was exactly what she felt. The woman clutched her purse tighter when she noticed Maya, pulling her husband slightly away as they entered Romano's. Maya had grown accustomed to these reactions. To most people, she was no longer Maya Rodriguez, honor roll student and classical pianist. She was just another homeless kid, another statistic, another problem to be avoided. The rain began to fall harder, drumming against the restaurant's windows. Maya looked up and down the street for somewhere to take shelter. The public library would close soon, and the homeless shelter had a waiting list longer than she could afford to wait on. She pulled her jacket tighter and tried to think of her options. She could try the church on 5th Street, but they only opened their doors on Wednesday nights. She could attempt to find a dry spot under the overpass, but that territory belonged to older, more established homeless individuals who didn't take kindly to newcomers. As she stood there getting soaked, Maya made a decision that surprised even herself. She took a deep breath, ran her fingers through her damp hair, and pushed open the door to Romano's bistro. The little bell above the entrance chimed cheerfully, and the warmth immediately enveloped her like a hug. The rich aromas of basil, tomatoes, and fresh bread made her dizzy with hunger. Conversations quieted as heads turned to look at the rain-soaked teenager who had just entered their midst. Maya could feel dozens of eyes assessing her, taking in her worn clothes, her unkempt appearance, her obvious displacement. A waitress with short blonde hair and worried blue eyes approached her quickly, clearly intending to escort her back outside before she could disturb the paying customers. The waitress wore a name tag that read Jessica and an expression that tried to be kind but firm. She had probably dealt with homeless individuals before, Maya realized. This was likely a routine she had performed many times, the polite but definitive removal of undesirable elements from the establishment. Maya raised her hand in a gesture of peace before Jessica could speak. "Please," she said, her voice barely above a whisper, "I know how this looks. I know you probably want me to leave." Her words came out in a rush, afraid that if she paused she would lose her nerve entirely. "But I saw the piano over there, and I can play, really play. Not just simple songs, but real classical music." Jessica paused, clearly taken aback by the articulate, desperate plea from someone she had assumed would be asking for handouts or causing trouble. The entire restaurant had gone quiet now, the clinking of silverware against plates the only sound besides the rain drumming against the windows. Maya pressed on, knowing she had only moments before Jessica's sympathy would give way to business practicality. "I haven't eaten in 2 days. I'm not asking for charity. I can earn a meal. If you let me play something on that piano, just one song, and people don't like it, I'll leave immediately. But if they do," she let the sentence hang in the air, hope and fear warring in her dark eyes. The restaurant owner, a stocky Italian man in his 50s named Tony Romano, emerged from behind the kitchen door. He had been watching the scene unfold and now approached with curiosity rather than anger. Tony had built his restaurant from nothing, and he understood what desperation looked like. He also knew that dinner service was typically slow on rainy Tuesday evenings, and perhaps live music might draw more customers. Jessica looked between Maya and Tony, waiting for direction. The girl standing before them was clearly homeless, but there was something different about her. She spoke with education and carried herself with a dignity that homelessness hadn't quite managed to strip away. Her request was unusual too. Most people who entered looking for help asked for food or money directly. This girl was offering something in return. Tony studied Maya's face, seeing past the dirt and exhaustion to the determined young woman underneath. "You really know how to play piano?" he asked in his thick Brooklyn accent. "Not just chopsticks or happy birthday?" Maya nodded emphatically. "I studied classical piano for 10 years. I was preparing for auditions to music conservatories before."
Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. She trailed off, not wanting to delve into the circumstances that had led her to this moment. "I can play Chopin, Beethoven, Rachmaninoff. Whatever you'd like to hear." A murmur rippled through the restaurant. Customers were leaning forward in their seats, intrigued by this unexpected drama unfolding before their evening meals. Some looked skeptical,
Others appeared moved by Maya's obvious desperation and the dignity with which she presented herself. Tony made his decision. "One song," he said, pointing toward the piano. "You play one song. If it's good, really good, I'll get you a hot meal, and maybe we talk about something more regular. If it's not," he shrugged, the implication clear. Maya felt tears of gratitude threatening to spill down her cheeks, but she held them back. She couldn't afford to appear weak now. "Thank you," she whispered. "You won't regret this." She walked toward the piano, acutely aware that every eye in the restaurant was following her movement. Her worn sneakers squeaked slightly against the polished floor, and she could hear whispered conversations starting up again as diners speculated about what they were about to witness. The piano bench was slightly wobbly, and Maya had to adjust it before sitting down. The keys were dusty and showed signs of infrequent use. Some were slightly yellowed with age, and a few seemed to stick when she pressed them experimentally. This was nothing like the pristine Steinway Grand at Riverside Academy, where she had spent countless hours perfecting her technique. Maya closed her eyes and tried to center herself. She thought about Mrs. Chen's voice during lessons, patient and encouraging. "Music comes from your heart, Maya, not just your fingers. Let the emotion flow through you and into the keys." She thought about her little brother Carlos, wherever he was now in the foster system, and how he used to fall asleep listening to her practice in the evening. She thought about all the dreams that had been shattered but not quite destroyed. Opening her eyes, Maya placed her hands on the keys and began to play Clair de Lune by Claude Debussy. The choice was deliberate. It was a piece that showcased technical skill while remaining accessible to listeners unfamiliar with classical music. More importantly, it was a piece she had memorized so thoroughly that her fingers could find the notes even on an unfamiliar and imperfect instrument. The first notes floated through Romano's bistro like moonlight filtering through clouds. Maya's touch was gentle but precise, coaxing beauty from the aging piano that had been silent for too long. The melody was haunting and ethereal, speaking of longing and dreams and the bittersweet nature of memory. Conversations died away entirely now. Forks paused midway to mouths. Children stopped fidgeting in their seats. Even the kitchen staff emerged to listen, drawn by the unexpected beauty filling their workplace. Maya was no longer conscious of her surroundings. The hunger, the exhaustion, the fear all faded away as her fingers found their home on the keyboard. This was who she really was, underneath the circumstances that had reduced her to begging for food. She was Maya Rodriguez, pianist, dreamer, artist. The music flowed through her like a river that had finally found its way to the sea. The piece built to its emotional climax, Maya's right hand dancing delicately over the melody, while her left provided the gentle rolling accompaniment that gave the piece its dreamlike quality. She had performed this same piece at the state piano competition 2 years ago, earning second place and a standing ovation. Now she played it for an audience of strangers who had begun as skeptics and were slowly being transformed into believers. As she approached the piece's gentle conclusion, Maya allowed herself to put every ounce of her longing, her hope and her determination into the final phrases. The last notes seemed to hang in the air like dewdrops, beautiful and fragile and perfect. When the music ended, Romano's bistro was completely silent. Maya kept her hands on the keys for a moment longer, reluctant to break the spell that had transported all of them, herself included, to some place beautiful and peaceful. Then the applause began. It started with Tony Romano, his calloused hands coming together with genuine appreciation. Jessica joined in, her eyes bright with surprise and admiration. Soon every person in the restaurant was clapping, some standing in their enthusiasm. A woman at a corner table wiped tears from her eyes. "That was extraordinary," she said to her dinner companion. "I haven't heard playing like that outside of Symphony Hall." The businessman who had complained about his soup earlier approached the piano. "Young lady," he said, his voice filled with respect, "that was absolutely beautiful. Where did you study?" Maya looked up at him, still slightly dazed from the performance. "Riverside Academy," she said quietly. "I was there until a few months ago." More people were gathering around the piano now, wanting to talk to the mysterious young woman who had transformed their ordinary dinner into something magical. Maya felt overwhelmed by the attention, unused to being seen with anything other than suspicion or pity. Tony Romano pushed through the small crowd. "Jessica," he called to his waitress, "get this young lady whatever she wants from the menu, and bring her some of that minestrone soup while she decides." He turned to Maya with a smile. "That was the most beautiful thing I've heard in my restaurant in 25 years. Maya felt the tears she had been holding back finally spill over. "Thank you," she managed. "Thank you so much." As Jessica led her to a table near the piano, Maya caught glimpses of her reflection in the restaurant's mirrors. She looked the same as she had when she entered, wet, tired, homeless. But something fundamental had shifted. For the first time in months she felt like herself again. She felt like someone with value, with something to offer the world besides just another mouth to feed or problem to solve. The hot soup arrived quickly, along with fresh bread and butter. Maya tried to eat slowly, to savor each spoonful, but her hunger was too great. She was acutely aware that people were still watching her, but their expressions had changed. Instead of suspicion or disgust, she saw curiosity, sympathy, and even admiration. A young girl, maybe 8 or 9 years old, approached her table shyly. "Miss," she said, "I take piano lessons, but I don't sound like that. How long did you practice?" Maya smiled at the girl, remembering herself at that age, full of questions about music and eager to learn. "Every day," she said, "for about 10 years. Do you like your lessons?" The girl nodded enthusiastically. "Sometimes they're hard, but I want to play beautiful music like you did. Keep practicing." Maya encouraged her. "Music will always be there for you even when everything else changes." As the evening progressed, more customers approached Maya's table. Some asked about her background, others simply wanted to compliment her performance. A few inquired whether she would be playing at Romano's again. Maya answered their questions as best she could, still overwhelmed by the positive attention, but gradually growing more comfortable. Tony Romano appeared at her table as she finished her second helping of soup. "Maya," he said, having learned her name from one of their conversations, "I got a proposition for you. Business has been slow lately, especially weeknight dinners. What if you came in and played piano a few evenings a week? I can't pay you much, but I can feed you and maybe we work out something about tips from customers." Maya looked at him in disbelief. After months of rejection, of being treated as invisible or undesirable, someone was offering her work. Real work, doing something she loved. "You mean it?" she asked. "I mean it," Tony confirmed. "You got talent, real talent. And people respond to that. Look around." He gestured to the restaurant, which had filled up considerably since Maya's performance. Word was apparently spreading, and new customers were arriving, drawn by reports of the exceptional piano player at Romano's. Maya accepted Tony's offer immediately, gratefully. It wasn't a permanent solution to her homelessness, but it was a start. It was hope. It was the first step back toward the life she had been forced to abandon. As she prepared to leave the restaurant that evening, her stomach full for the first time in days and a job to return to tomorrow, Maya felt something she hadn't experienced in months. She felt proud of herself. Proud that she had found the courage to walk through those doors, to take the risk of public humiliation in exchange for a chance. Proud that she had proven, to herself as much as to the strangers in the restaurant, that she was more than her circumstances. The rain had stopped, and the streets reflected the glow of neon signs and streetlights. Maya walked with purpose now, heading toward the shelter where she hoped to secure a bed for the night. Tomorrow she would return to Romano's, and she would play again. The dream of music school and concert halls still seemed impossibly distant, but for the first time since becoming homeless, they no longer seemed impossible. Maya Rodriguez, the girl who had been refused food and shelter and basic human dignity by so many, had reminded herself and everyone who witnessed her performance that true worth cannot be measured by circumstances. She had shown that talent and determination and the human spirit could shine through even the darkest of times. As she walked through the Portland night, Maya hummed Claire de Lune softly to herself. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but tonight she had her music back. And with her music she had hope. 3 weeks had passed since Maya's first performance at Romano's bistro, and the small restaurant had transformed into something neither she nor Tony could have anticipated. Word had spread through Portland's tight-knit downtown community about the homeless girl who played classical piano like a seasoned professional. What started as a few curious diners had grown into packed houses every Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday evening when Maya performed. Maya herself had undergone her own transformation during those 3 weeks. Tony had arranged for her to use the small storage room behind the kitchen as a place to wash up and change clothes. Jessica had brought her some of her younger sister's clothes, simple but clean items that fit Maya's slight frame. The constant meals had begun to fill out her gaunt cheeks, and regular sleep at the shelter had erased some of the dark circles from under her eyes. But the most significant change was in Maya's confidence. Each performance had built upon the last, her comfort level growing as she realized that the audiences genuinely appreciated her music. She had expanded her repertoire beyond the safe classical pieces, incorporating some contemporary arrangements and even taking requests from regular customers who had become familiar with her abilities. On this particular Thursday evening, Maya sat at the piano preparing for what had become her routine pre-performance ritual. She closed her eyes and let her fingers warm up with gentle scales, feeling the familiar comfort of the keys beneath her touch. The restaurant buzzed with conversation as diners finished their meals and settled in for the evening's entertainment. Dr. Sarah Chen, a music professor from Portland State University, occupied her usual table near the piano. She had first heard about Maya from a colleague and had been attending her performances for the past 2 weeks, each time growing more intrigued by the young woman's exceptional talent and obvious formal training. Tonight she had brought a guest with her, a distinguished older man in an expensive suit who kept glancing at Maya with intense curiosity. Maya began her set with Chopin's Minute Waltz, her fingers dancing across the keys with the technical precision that had earned her state competition medals just 2 years ago. The piece was challenging, requiring both speed and delicacy, but Maya's hands moved with the muscle memory of thousands of hours of practice. As she played, she noticed the older man at Dr. Chen's table leaning forward, his attention completely focused on her performance. When she finished the Chopin piece, the familiar applause filled the restaurant. Maya had grown comfortable with the appreciation, no longer feeling overwhelmed by the positive attention. She transitioned into a gentle arrangement of The Way You Look Tonight, a request from Mrs. Patterson, an elderly widow who attended every one of Maya's performances and always sat at the same table by the window. It was during this second piece that Maya noticed something unusual happening. The older man at Dr. Chen's table had pulled out his phone and was recording her performance. This wasn't entirely uncommon. Several people had recorded short clips of her playing to share with friends or on social media. But this man seemed different. He was recording with the focused attention of someone documenting something significant. After her third song, Maya took her customary short break, accepting a glass of water from Jessica and chatting briefly with some of the regular customers. Dr. Chen approached her during this interlude, accompanied by her mysterious guest. Maya, Dr. Chen said warmly, "I'd like you to meet someone very special. This is James Morrison, the artistic director of the Oregon Symphony." Maya nearly dropped her water glass. The Oregon Symphony was one of the most prestigious orchestras on the West Coast, and she had attended their performances several times during her years at Riverside Academy. James Morrison was a legendary figure in classical music circles, known for discovering and nurturing young talent. Morrison extended his hand to Maya with a gentle smile. "Miss Rodriguez, Dr. Chen has been telling me about your performances here, but hearing you play in person is something else entirely. Your technique is remarkable, but more than that, your musical interpretation shows a maturity that's quite rare in someone your age." Maya felt her heart racing. She had dreamed of meeting someone like James Morrison, but never under these circumstances. "Thank you, sir," she managed, acutely aware that despite her cleaner clothes and better nutrition, she was still essentially homeless, still sleeping at shelters and living meal to meal. "I understand you studied at Riverside Academy," Morrison continued. "Helen Zhang was your instructor, correct?" "I know Helen well. She's mentioned a particularly gifted student named Maya Rodriguez in the past." The mention of her former teacher's name brought a wave of emotions. Mrs. Zhang had been more than an instructor. She had been a mentor and almost a surrogate mother figure during Maya's final years in foster care. When Maya had disappeared from school, she wondered if Mrs. Zhang had worried about her, if she had tried to find out what happened to her most promising student. "Yes, sir. Mrs. Zhang taught me for 4 years. She was preparing me for conservatory auditions when—"
Maya's voice trailed off. She still found it difficult to explain her circumstances without feeling shame, despite the fact that her homelessness was not her fault. Morrison's expression softened with understanding. "Dr. Chen mentioned some of your situation. Maya, talent like yours doesn't come along very often. I've been in this business for 30 years, and I can recognize exceptional ability when I hear it. What you've accomplished here, performing at this level after months away from formal training, is nothing short of remarkable." Dr. Chen joined the conversation. "Maya, we've been discussing some possibilities. The university has a program for non-traditional students, and there are scholarships available for exceptional musicians. If you're interested, we'd like to help you get back into formal training." Maya stared at them both, hardly daring to believe what she was hearing. For months she had assumed that her dreams of music school were permanently destroyed. The idea that she might still have a chance seemed too good to be true. "But I don't have transcripts or recommendations or any of the things you need for college applications," Maya said, practical concerns flooding her mind. "And I'm homeless. I don't have an address or a guardian or any of the stability that schools require." Morrison and Dr. Chen exchanged a knowing look. "Maya," Morrison said, "exceptional circumstances call for exceptional measures. Dr. Chen and I have been working with other community leaders to establish a program specifically for talented young people who have faced unusual challenges. You wouldn't be the first gifted student we've helped transition from difficult circumstances back into academic life." Dr. Chen nodded enthusiastically. "We have housing assistance, academic support, and most importantly, we have people who understand that talent doesn't always come in conventional packages. Your situation doesn't disqualify you from pursuing your musical education. If anything, the resilience you've shown makes you exactly the kind of student we want to support." Maya felt tears welling up in her eyes. For so long she had felt like damaged goods, like someone whose circumstances had made her unworthy of the dreams she had once harbored. The idea that respected professionals saw potential in her rather than just problems was almost overwhelming. "There would be conditions, of course," Morrison continued. "You'd need to commit to academic requirements, maintain certain standards, and work with counselors to address the trauma you've undoubtedly experienced. But Maya, I want you to understand something important. What you have, this gift, it's not something that can be taught. Technical skills can be learned, but the musicality you possess is innate. It would be a tragedy to let it go to waste." Maya nodded eagerly, afraid that if she spoke, she might say something to make them change their minds. The possibility of returning to formal musical education seemed like a lifeline thrown to someone drowning. "Can I think about it?" she asked, immediately regretting the question. Who asks for time to consider a miracle?
But Morrison smiled approvingly. That's exactly the kind of thoughtful response I was hoping for. This is a big decision, and you should consider it carefully. Dr. Chen will give you her contact information. Take a few days, think about what you want, and then let us know. As they prepared to return to their table, Dr. Chen handed Maya a business card and added, "Maya, I want you to know that several of us have been watching your performances here, and we've all come to the same conclusion. You have something special. Don't let anyone, including yourself, convince you otherwise." Maya returned to the piano for the second half of her performance with her mind racing. The music flowed from her fingers as always, but her thoughts were consumed with possibilities she had forced herself to stop imagining. College, proper training, maybe even a future in professional music. It seemed impossible, but these were serious people making a serious offer. After the evening's final song, Maya found herself surrounded by the usual group of well-wishers and regular customers. But tonight she also noticed several new faces in the crowd. A woman with a press badge approached her during the post-performance mingling. "Maya, I'm Jennifer Walsh from the Portland Tribune. I've been hearing incredible things about your performances here, and I'd love to do a story about your journey. Would you be open to an interview?" Before Maya could respond, Tony Romano appeared at her side. "Slow down there," he told the reporter, with good-natured firmness. "Maya's been through enough. If you want to interview her, you go through me first." Maya felt a surge of gratitude toward Tony, who had become something of a protective figure in her life. But she also realized that media attention might not be entirely unwelcome. If her story inspired other people in similar situations, or if it helped raise awareness about the challenges facing homeless youth, perhaps it could serve a purpose beyond her own circumstances. "It's okay, Tony," Maya said quietly. "I think I'd like to talk to her." The interview took place 2 days later in a quiet corner of Romano's during the afternoon lull. Jennifer Walsh proved to be a thoughtful interviewer, asking sensitive questions about Maya's background and circumstances without sensationalizing her situation. Maya found herself opening up about her time in foster care, her musical training, and the events that had led to her homelessness. "What kept you going during the darkest times?" Jennifer asked. Maya considered the question carefully. "Music," she said finally. "Even when I couldn't play, when I had no access to a piano, I could still hear music in my head. I could still remember what it felt like to create something beautiful. That memory kept me from giving up completely." The interview delved into Maya's plans for the future, including the opportunity Dr. Chen and James Morrison had presented. Maya admitted that she was still processing the offer, still hardly believing that such doors were opening for her. "What do you want people to understand about homelessness among young people?" Jennifer asked toward the end of their conversation. Maya thought about all the assumptions people had made about her over the past months, all the looks of disgust or fear she had received simply because she lacked a permanent address. "I want people to understand that homeless people aren't just statistics or problems to be solved. We're individuals with stories, with talents, with dreams just like everyone else. Sometimes we just need someone to give us a chance to show who we really are underneath our circumstances." The article appeared in the Portland Tribune's Sunday edition under the headline "From Streets to Symphony, Local Homeless Teens' Musical Gift Inspires Community." The story included several photographs of Maya at the piano and quoted both Dr. Chen and James Morrison about the program they were developing for talented young people in crisis. The response to the article was immediate and overwhelming. Romano's received dozens of phone calls from people wanting to know when Maya would be performing next. Local television stations reached out requesting interviews. Most surprisingly, Maya began receiving messages from other young people who had experienced homelessness or aged out of foster care, thanking her for sharing her story and inspiring them not to give up on their own dreams. But perhaps the most meaningful response came from an unexpected source. On Tuesday evening, as Maya prepared for her regular performance, Jessica approached her with a nervous expression. "Maya, there's someone here to see you. She says she's your former piano teacher." Maya looked toward the restaurant entrance and saw a familiar figure standing uncertainly by the hostess station. Helen Zhang looked older than Maya remembered, her black hair now streaked with silver, but her kind eyes were exactly as they had been during those countless lessons at Riverside Academy. Maya felt her composure crumble as she ran toward her former teacher. Mrs. Zhang embraced her warmly, and Maya allowed herself to cry the tears she had been holding back for months. "I've been looking for you ever since you disappeared from school," Mrs. Zhang said softly. "When I saw the newspaper article, I couldn't believe it was really you. Oh, Maya, I'm so sorry for what you've been through." They sat together at a quiet table while Maya explained everything that had happened since she had last seen her teacher. Mrs. Zhang listened with the same patient attention she had always shown during lessons, occasionally asking clarifying questions, but mostly just providing the supportive presence Maya had missed so desperately. "I never stopped believing in your talent," Mrs. Zhang told her. "Even when you disappeared, I kept telling people about this extraordinary student I had, this girl who understood music in ways that couldn't be taught. I'm so proud of you for finding your way back to the piano." Mrs. Zhang had brought something with her, Maya's old lesson books and sheet music, items she had saved when Maya's belongings were cleaned out of her practice room at the academy. Among them was Maya's well-worn copy of the Chopin Nocturnes, filled with her own penciled notations and practice reminders. "I thought you might want these back," Mrs. Zhang said, watching as Maya flipped through the familiar pages. "And I have something else for you. I've been in touch with Dr. Chen and Mr. Morrison about your situation. They've asked me to provide a formal recommendation for your application to Portland State's music program." Maya looked up from her sheet music in surprise. "You'd do that for me?" Mrs. Zhang smiled. "Maya, you were the most talented student I ever taught. Your circumstances don't change that fact. If anything, what you've overcome makes me even more confident in your abilities. Talent without resilience doesn't usually succeed in professional music. You've proven you have both." That evening's performance was one of Maya's most emotional yet. She played several pieces from her old lesson books, including a Chopin nocturne that had been one of Mrs. Zhang's favorites. Having her former teacher in the audience, hearing the familiar encouraging voice call out beautiful phrasing, Maya, after particularly expressive passages, felt like reclaiming a piece of her former self. After the performance, Mrs. Zhang approached Maya with one final surprise. "I've spoken with Dr. Chen, and we've arranged for you to have access to the practice rooms at Portland State starting next week. You'll need to prepare audition pieces if you decide to apply for the program, and you'll need proper practice time on quality instruments." Maya felt overwhelmed by the generosity and support suddenly surrounding her. For so long she had felt like she was facing the world alone, that she had to solve all her problems through her own limited resources. Now she was discovering that her talent and determination had created a community of people invested in her success. Over the following weeks, Maya threw herself into preparation for the audition process with an intensity that surprised even her. The practice rooms at Portland State became her second home, and she spent hours each day working through challenging repertoire under Mrs. Zhang's renewed guidance. Her technique, which had remained remarkably solid despite months away from regular practice, quickly regained its former precision and power. But Maya was also learning that returning to serious musical study meant confronting aspects of her experience she had tried to suppress. The emotional demands of advanced musical performance required her to access feelings she had buried during her time on the streets. Working with a counselor provided through Dr. Chen's program, Maya began processing the trauma of her homelessness and the deeper wounds left by years in the foster care system. "Music has always been your emotional outlet," her counselor Dr. Patricia Williams observed during one of their sessions. "But during your time on the streets you had to shut down emotionally just to survive. Learning to access those feelings again through your music is part of your healing process. Maya found this to be true. As she worked on more emotionally demanding pieces, she sometimes found herself crying during practice sessions, releasing grief and fear she hadn't allowed herself to feel when survival was her primary concern. But she also discovered that this emotional vulnerability was making her playing more mature and expressive than it had ever been before. The formal audition for Portland State's music program was scheduled for a Saturday morning in late November. Maya had prepared 3 contrasting pieces, a Bach prelude and fugue to demonstrate technical proficiency, a Chopin ballade to showcase her romantic interpretation skills, and a contemporary piece by an American composer to prove her versatility. On the morning of the audition, Maya woke in the small apartment she now shared with another student in the university's transition housing program. The apartment was tiny and sparsely furnished, but it was hers, a stable address where she could receive mail and store her growing collection of sheet music. Having a key to her own door still felt like a miracle some days. Dr. Chen had arranged for Maya to warm up in one of the practice rooms before her audition. As she ran through scales and technical exercises, Maya thought about how far she had traveled from that desperate evening when she had stood outside Romano's bistro, hungry and hopeless. The journey hadn't been easy, and she knew there would be more challenges ahead, but she was no longer facing them alone. The audition panel consisted of 5 faculty members, including Dr. Chen and a guest examiner from the Oregon Symphony. Maya performed her prepared pieces with confidence and technical skill, but more importantly, she performed them with the emotional depth that had always set her apart from other talented young musicians. When she finished her final piece, the panel members exchanged glances that Maya couldn't interpret. Dr. Chen smiled encouragingly, but maintained the professional demeanor appropriate for formal auditions. "Thank you, Maya," said the lead faculty member. "We'll notify you of our decision within 2 weeks." Maya left the audition feeling cautiously optimistic, but trying not to get her hopes too high. She had learned to protect herself from disappointment, and despite all the support she had received, she still struggled sometimes to believe that good things could really happen to her. The waiting period turned out to be shorter than anticipated. Dr. Chen called Maya 3 days after the audition with news that would change everything. "Maya," she said, her voice unable to contain her excitement, "not only have you been accepted into our program, but the faculty has voted unanimously to offer you our most prestigious scholarship. It covers full tuition, provides a living stipend, and includes access to private instruction with our most distinguished faculty members." Maya sat down heavily on her small apartment's second-hand couch, the phone still pressed to her ear. "Are you sure? Are you absolutely sure they mean me?" Dr. Chen laughed. "I'm completely sure. Maya, your audition was extraordinary. The guest examiner from the symphony said it was one of the most compelling performances he'd heard from a student applicant in years." Towards Saw. Maya, you didn't just demonstrate technical ability, you showed artistic maturity that typically takes years to develop. The scholarship would begin in the spring semester, giving Maya time to continue her work with her counselor and complete some prerequisite academic coursework. But more than the practical benefits, the acceptance represented validation that her dreams were not only possible, but supported by people who understood the value of what she had to offer. That evening at Romano's, Tony made an announcement to the packed restaurant before Maya's performance. "Ladies and gentlemen, our Maya has been accepted to Portland State University on a full music scholarship. She's going to be a college student." The applause was deafening, and Maya felt tears of gratitude streaming down her face as she looked out at the faces of people who had become her community. Many of them had been strangers just a few months ago, but they had welcomed her, supported her, and believed in her when she couldn't believe in herself. As she began to play that evening, Maya chose a piece she had never performed publicly before, her own arrangement of Amazing Grace. It was a song that had sustained her through her darkest moments on the streets, and now it felt like a perfect expression of gratitude for the transformation she had experienced. The melody floated through Romano's bistro, carrying with it all the pain and hope and resilience that had brought Maya to this moment. In the audience, she could see Mrs. Zhang wiping tears from her eyes, Tony beaming with paternal pride, and Dr. Chen nodding with satisfaction at seeing her investment in a young person's potential beginning to pay dividends. Maya realized as she played that her story was far from over. College would bring new challenges, and a career in music would require continued dedication and sacrifice. But she had learned something invaluable during her months of homelessness and her journey back to stability. She was stronger than she had ever imagined, her talent was more resilient than her circumstances, and there were people in the world willing to help those who helped themselves. The song ended with a gentle, hopeful cadence, and Maya looked out at her audience with confidence. She was no longer the desperate girl who had begged for a chance to play for food. She was Maya Rodriguez, scholarship recipient, survivor, artist. She was someone with a future worth fighting for. 2 years had transformed Maya Rodriguez from a homeless teenager, begging for meals, into one of Portland State University's most accomplished music students. Her scholarship had provided more than just tuition and housing, it had opened doors she never could have imagined. Now, as she stood backstage at the renowned Arlene Schnitzer Concert Hall, preparing for what would be the most important performance of her life, Maya reflected on the extraordinary journey that had brought her to this moment. The concert hall was sold out, with over 2,700 seats filled with an audience that included music critics from major newspapers, talent scouts from record labels, and representatives from conservatories across the country. But Maya knew that scattered throughout that sea of faces were the people who had made this moment possible. Tony, Romano and Jessica from the bistro, Dr. Chen and Mrs. Zhang, her counselor Dr. Williams, and dozens of others who had believed in her when she couldn't believe in herself. Maya's reputation had grown steadily throughout her university years. Her professors had recognized immediately that she possessed not just exceptional technical skills, but the rare combination of musical intelligence and emotional depth that separated good musicians from great ones. By her sophomore year, she was performing as a soloist with the university orchestra, and by her junior year, she had won the prestigious Northwest Regional Piano Competition, defeating graduate students and young professionals from across the Pacific Northwest. The victory at the regional competition had caught the attention of Elena Vasquez, one of the most respected artist managers in classical music. Elena had built her career discovering and developing young talent, and she had flown to Portland specifically to hear Maya perform after receiving glowing reports from several industry contacts. Their first meeting had taken place in a small practice room at the university, but Elena's interest had been immediate and serious. "Maya," she had said after hearing her play for just 15 minutes, "I've been managing classical musicians for 25 years, and I can count on one hand the number of artists I've met who have your combination of technical mastery and authentic emotional expression. I'd like to work with you." The partnership with Elena had opened doors that Maya was still learning to walk through. Recording contracts, international competition opportunities, and performance invitations had begun arriving regularly. But perhaps most importantly, Elena had helped Maya navigate the business side of professional music while protecting the artistic integrity that made her playing so compelling. Tonight's concert represented the culmination of all this development. Maya was making her debut with the Oregon Symphony as their featured soloist, performing Rachmaninoff's Piano Concerto No. 2, one of the most technically demanding and emotionally complex works in the standard repertoire. It was a piece she had dreamed of performing since her early days studying with Mrs. Zhang, but had never imagined she would play with a major symphony orchestra. The significance of this moment extended beyond Maya's personal achievement. The concert was being recorded for a live album that would mark her professional recording debut. Classical music journalists from the New York Times, the Washington Post, and several international publications were in attendance. Most importantly to Maya, the performance was being broadcast live on public radio, meaning that homeless shelters, community centers, and other places where people might need to hear a message of hope would have access to her music. Maya had spent months preparing for this performance with an intensity that impressed even her demanding professors. She had worked with visiting artist faculty members to refine her interpretation of the Rachmaninoff, studying recordings by legendary performers while developing her own unique approach to the piece. The concerto's 3 movements traced an emotional journey from struggle through contemplation to triumph, themes that resonated deeply with Maya's own life experience. As she stood backstage, Maya could hear the orchestra completing their performance of the evening's opening piece. Soon it would be time for her entrance, time to walk onto the stage where she had once sat in the audience as a foster child, dreaming of someday performing on that very platform. Elena appeared at Maya's side, offering final words of encouragement. "Remember," she said quietly, "everyone in that audience is here because they want to hear you succeed. You've earned this moment through talent, hard work, and perseverance. Now go out there and show them why you belong on this stage." Maya nodded, feeling the familiar pre-performance flutter of nerves mixed with excitement. She had learned to channel this energy into her playing, using the adrenaline to heighten her focus and emotional connection to the music. The orchestra had finished their opening piece, and Maya could hear the applause from the audience. Soon the stage manager would give her the signal to make her entrance. She closed her eyes for a moment, thinking about all the people who had helped her reach this moment, and about the young people who might be listening tonight, who needed to hear that their circumstances didn't define their potential. The stage manager appeared at her elbow. "You're on, Maya. Break a leg." Maya walked onto the stage of the Arlene Schnitzer Concert Hall to thunderous applause. The lights were bright and warm and she could see faces in the first few rows, though the back of the hall disappeared into darkness. She took her place at the beautiful Steinway grand piano, the same model she had dreamed of playing during her years of homelessness. James Morrison, now the conductor for tonight's performance, raised his baton. Maya placed her hands on the keys and took a deep breath. The opening orchestral passage of the Rachmaninoff began, those haunting dramatic chords that announced one of the most beloved works in the classical repertoire. When Maya's entrance arrived, her hands found the keys with the confidence of someone who belonged exactly where she was. The piano sang under her touch, each note precisely placed but infused with the emotional authenticity that had become her trademark. This was the same gift that had moved people to tears in a small bistro, now developed and refined but still carrying that essential quality that made her playing so compelling. As the first movement progressed, Maya felt herself entering the zone that all performers strive for, where technical concerns disappear and music becomes a direct expression of the soul. The orchestra responded to her musical choices, and she to theirs, creating the kind of collaborative music-making that transforms a good performance into an unforgettable one. During the quiet, introspective second movement, Maya thought about the journey that had brought her to this stage. The loneliness of homelessness, the fear and uncertainty, the small kindnesses that had kept her going, and the larger acts of faith that had given her a second chance. All of it was in her playing now, informing every phrase with hard-won wisdom about resilience and hope. The final movement built to its magnificent climax, Maya's hands flying over the keys with virtuosic brilliance, while never losing sight of the music's emotional core. As the concerto rushed toward its triumphant conclusion, Maya felt a profound sense of completion, not just of the piece, but of a chapter in her own story. The final chords resonated through the concert hall, and for a moment there was complete silence. Then the audience erupted in the kind of sustained, enthusiastic applause that classical musicians dream of receiving. People rose to their feet, and Maya could see that many audience members were wiping tears from their eyes. Maya stood and bowed, overwhelmed by the response but also aware that something important had just happened. This wasn't just a successful performance, it was a statement about the power of human potential and the importance of giving people chances to reveal their capabilities. The applause continued for several minutes, with the audience calling for encore after encore. Finally, Maya returned to the piano and played a simple, beautiful arrangement of Amazing Grace, the same piece she had performed on that emotional evening at Romano's, when she had first begun to believe in her future again. As the last notes of the encore faded away, Maya looked out at the audience and spoke into the microphone that had been brought onto the stage. "Thank you all so much for this incredible welcome," she began, her voice carrying clearly through the hall. 2.5 years ago, I was homeless, hungry, and convinced that my dreams were impossible. Tonight I stand before you as proof that circumstances don't determine destiny, that talent can survive even the darkest times, and that there are always people willing to help if we have the courage to ask for it. The audience responded with another wave of applause, but Maya continued, "This performance is dedicated to everyone who refuses to give up on young people, who sees potential instead of problems, and who believes that everyone deserves a second chance. It's also dedicated to any young person listening tonight who might be facing their own struggles. Your circumstances are not your story's ending. Keep fighting for your dreams." The standing ovation that followed was the longest in the concert hall's recent history. As Maya finally left the stage, she was met by Elena, who was beaming with pride and excitement. "Maya, that was extraordinary," Elena said. "I've already had 3 major orchestras approach me about booking you for next season. The Times critic told me it was the most moving Rachmaninoff performance he's heard in years. You've just announced yourself as a major artist." But the response that meant the most to Maya came from an unexpected source. As she made her way through the post-concert reception, a young woman approached her with tears in her eyes. "Miss Rodriguez," the woman said, "my name is Lisa Chen, and I wanted to thank you. I aged out of foster care last year, and I've been struggling with homelessness and trying to finish college. I almost gave up last month, but then I heard about your story. Tonight's performance reminded me that I can't quit on myself. Thank you for showing me that it's possible to overcome." Maya embraced Lisa, remembering her own desperate need to see examples of people who had survived and thrived despite difficult beginnings. "What are you studying?" she asked. "Social work," Lisa replied. "I want to help other kids who are going through what we went through." Maya felt a deep sense of satisfaction. This was why her success mattered beyond personal achievement. Every young person who saw her story and chose not to give up was proof that her platform carried responsibilities as well as privileges. The weeks following the concert brought a whirlwind of opportunities. The live recording received glowing reviews in major publications, with critics praising both Maya's technical brilliance and her emotional maturity. Several international orchestras extended invitations for her to perform as a guest soloist, and recording companies began serious discussions about exclusive contracts. But Maya also made sure to maintain her connection to the community that had nurtured her recovery. She continued to perform regularly at Romano's Bistro, which had expanded and rebranded itself as Maya's Piano Café in honor of its most famous performer. These intimate performances kept her grounded and reminded her of the power of music to touch individual lives. Maya also established a scholarship fund for homeless and foster youth interested in pursuing music education. Working with Dr. Chen and Mrs. Zhang, she created a program that provided not just financial support, but mentoring and stability for young people whose talent might otherwise go undeveloped due to their circumstances. The first recipient of the Maya Rodriguez Scholarship was a 15-year-old violinist named David Park, who had been living in his car with his mother after they lost their apartment. David's talent was undeniable, but his situation had made regular practice impossible and school attendance sporadic. The scholarship provided him with housing, an instrument, and access to top-tier instruction. "Having someone who understands what I'm going through makes all the difference," David told Maya during one of their mentoring sessions. "You show me that music can be a way out, not just a dream." Maya's influence began extending beyond individual success stories. She was invited to testify before the state legislature about the needs of homeless youth, bringing national attention to the challenges facing young people aging out of foster care. Her articulate advocacy and personal story helped secure increased funding for transitional housing and educational support programs. The combination of Maya's artistic success and her advocacy work caught the attention of national media outlets. She was featured on the cover of American Music magazine, interviewed on National Public Radio, and invited to perform at several high-profile benefit concerts for homeless youth. But perhaps the most meaningful recognition came when she was invited to perform at the Kennedy Center in Washington, D.C., as part of a special concert honoring Americans who had overcome adversity to achieve excellence in the arts. Sharing the program with other performers who had triumphed over significant challenges, Maya felt part of a tradition of artists who had used their platforms to inspire and advocate for others. The Kennedy Center performance was attended by members of Congress, Supreme Court justices, and other dignitaries, but Maya's preparation remained focused on the music itself and the message it could carry. She chose to perform her own composition, a piece called Resilience, that traced a musical journey from despair through hope to triumph. As she played in the nation's premier concert hall, Maya thought about all the young people across the country who might be listening, who needed to hear that their struggles could become sources of strength rather than permanent limitations. The piece built to a powerful conclusion that seemed to affirm the indomitable nature of human spirit when supported by community and opportunity. The audience response was overwhelming, but what touched Maya most deeply were the messages she received afterward from young people across the country who had heard the broadcast and found inspiration in her story. Letters arrived from homeless shelters, foster care facilities, and youth programs, all sharing variations of the same message: "Thank you for showing us that our dreams are still possible." One letter particularly moved her, from a 17-year-old named Marcus, who had been living on the streets of Chicago. "Dear Maya, I heard your concert on the radio at the shelter last night. I used to play guitar before everything fell apart, and I thought that part of my life was over forever. But hearing you play and knowing where you came from, I think maybe I should try to find a guitar again. Maybe music can save me too." Maya kept that letter in her practice room as a reminder of why her success mattered beyond personal fulfillment. Every time she sat down to practice, she was preparing not just for her own performances, but for the possibility that her music might reach someone who needed to hear a message of hope. As her career continued to flourish, Maya made conscious choices about how to use her growing platform. She insisted that her concerts include program notes about her background and information about resources for homeless youth. She donated a percentage of her performance fees to organizations supporting young people in crisis. Most importantly, she continued to speak openly about her experiences, refusing to allow her success to erase the reality of what she had overcome. The transformation was complete, but Maya understood that her story was ongoing. She was no longer the desperate teenager who had begged for a chance to play piano for food, but she carried that experience with her as a source of empathy and motivation. Her music had evolved to incorporate the depth that came from surviving genuine hardship, and her success had meaning because of the platform it provided for advocacy and inspiration. On the evening of her 21st birthday, Maya returned to Romano's for a special performance. The restaurant was packed with friends, family, professors, and members of the community who had supported her journey. Tony Romano presented her with a key to the restaurant and announced that she would always have a home there whenever she needed one. As she sat at the piano where her transformation had begun, Maya chose to play the same piece that had started it all, Clair de Lune. But now the music carried additional layers of meaning, informed by years of growth, study, and the knowledge that dreams deferred are not necessarily dreams denied. The audience listened in reverent silence, many remembering that first desperate performance when Maya had risked everything for a chance to show who she really was. Now they were witnessing the full flowering of that potential, but the essential quality that had moved them from the beginning remained unchanged, the ability to translate life experience into music that touched the heart. When the piece ended, the applause was warm and sustained, but it felt different from the thunderous ovations she had received at major concert halls. This was the appreciation of a community celebrating one of their own, people who had invested in her success not for glory or profit, but because they recognized her worth as a human being. Maya stood and looked out at the faces of people who had become her chosen family. "Thank you all for seeing past my circumstances to my potential," she said. "Thank you for proving that kindness and opportunity can transform lives, and thank you for teaching me that success is only meaningful when it's shared with others." As the evening wound down, Maya reflected on the journey that had brought her from homeless teenager to successful professional musician and advocate. The path had been neither straight nor easy, but it had led to a life richer and more purposeful than she had ever imagined possible. She understood now that her story was not unique in its struggles, but perhaps unusual in its outcome. Too many talented young people never received the chances that had been extended to her. Her responsibility was to use her platform to ensure that other young people facing similar challenges would have access to the support and opportunities that had made her transformation possible. Maya Rodriguez had proved that with talent, determination, and community support, even the most desperate circumstances could be overcome. Her music would continue to inspire audiences around the world, but her greatest achievement was demonstrating that every young person deserves the chance to show the world who they can become when given hope and opportunity. The girl who had once been refused food had become a voice for the voiceless, and her piano performances would forever carry the message that human potential should never be underestimated, no matter the circumstances from which it emerges. 5 years after her Kennedy Center triumph, Maya Rodriguez had established herself as one of the most sought-after pianists of her generation. Her international career flourished with performances across Europe, Asia, and the Americas, but she never forgot the community that had lifted her from desperation to success. Her story had become a beacon for countless young people facing similar struggles, and her commitment to advocacy had grown alongside her artistic achievements. Maya's apartment in downtown Portland reflected her dual identity as both accomplished artist and dedicated activist. The living room featured a beautiful grand piano where she practiced daily, surrounded by framed photographs from her performances at prestigious venues worldwide. But the walls also displayed artwork created by participants in her scholarship program, letters from young people whose lives had been changed by her foundation, and awards recognizing her humanitarian work alongside her musical accomplishments. The Maya Rodriguez Foundation had grown from a simple scholarship fund into a comprehensive support system for homeless and at-risk youth interested in the arts. The organization operated 3 residential facilities providing stable housing for young artists, maintained partnerships with dozens of schools and conservatories across the country, and had helped over 400 young people transition from crisis situations into stable, productive lives pursuing their creative dreams. Dr.
Williams, Maya's former counselor, who now served on the foundation's board, often marveled at how her former client had channeled her own healing into a mission to heal others. Maya understood from her own experience that trauma doesn't have to be the end of the story, Dr. Williams explained to new staff members. She's living proof that with proper support, young people can transform their pain into purpose. The Foundation's flagship program was the Artists in Transition residential facility, housed in a renovated historic building that provided studio spaces, practice rooms, and living accommodations for up to 30 young people at a time. Residents ranged in age from 16 to 24, and while they came from diverse backgrounds, they shared common experiences of homelessness, foster care, or family crisis that had disrupted their ability to pursue artistic education. Maya visited the facility regularly, not just as a figurehead, but as an active mentor who worked directly with residents. She conducted masterclasses for the musicians, offered career guidance sessions, and most importantly,
provided living proof that their current circumstances didn't define their future possibilities. During one of her weekly visits, Maya worked with a 17-year-old cellist named Samantha Chen, who had been living in her car with her younger sister after their parents died in an accident. Samantha possessed exceptional musical talent, but had been unable to maintain consistent practice or continue her lessons due to the instability of her housing situation. "I keep worrying that I've lost too much time," Samantha confided during their lesson. "Other kids my age have been studying consistently, while I've been just trying to survive." Maya nodded with understanding, remembering her own fears about falling behind during her months on the streets. "Samantha, I didn't touch a piano for almost 6 months when I was homeless. When I finally played again, I was terrified that I'd lost everything I'd worked for. But what I discovered was that the music was still inside me, and all those hours of practice from before were still there in my muscle memory." She demonstrated by playing a complex passage, then guided Samantha through the same piece. "See, your technique is still solid. What you've gained during this difficult time is resilience and life experience that will make your music more meaningful." Some of the most powerful performances come from artists who have something real to say because they've lived through real challenges. The foundation also operated an outreach program that sent professional artists into homeless shelters, group homes, and crisis centers to identify young people with artistic potential who might benefit from additional support. Maya had learned that talent often existed in places where it went unrecognized or undeveloped due to circumstances beyond the young person's control. Through this program, they discovered Manuel Santos, a 19-year-old poet and spoken word artist who had been homeless since aging out of foster care at 18. Manuel's lyrics dealt with themes of abandonment, survival, and hope, delivered with a raw authenticity that moved audiences to tears. The foundation helped him secure stable housing, provided access to recording equipment, and connected him with established artists who could help develop his craft. "Maya showed me that art isn't just something you do when your life is perfect," Manuel explained during a foundation fundraiser, where he performed alongside Maya and other program alumni. "Art can be how you survive when your life is falling apart, and how you help other people survive too." The foundation's success had attracted national attention and support from major donors, corporations, and government agencies. Maya had testified before Congress multiple times about the needs of homeless youth, and her articulate advocacy had helped secure millions of dollars in federal funding for similar programs nationwide. But Maya was careful to ensure that the foundation's growth didn't compromise its core mission of providing individualized, compassionate support to young people in crisis. She insisted that every program participant work with a dedicated counselor to address trauma and mental health needs alongside their artistic development. "You can't separate the art from the artist," Maya explained to foundation staff during training sessions. "These young people have experienced profound disruptions and losses. Their creative expression is often how they process and heal from these experiences, but they also need direct therapeutic support to build healthy coping mechanisms and life skills." Maya's own artistic career continued to flourish alongside her advocacy work. She had released 3 critically acclaimed albums, performed as a soloist with virtually every major orchestra in the United States, and had begun commissioning new works from contemporary composers who wrote specifically for her unique interpretive style. Her playing had evolved to incorporate the depth and emotional complexity that came from her lived experience and her ongoing work with young people facing similar challenges. Critics frequently noted the unusual combination of technical brilliance and authentic emotional expression that characterized her performances. "Rodriguez doesn't just play the notes," wrote a reviewer for the New York Times after her performance of Beethoven's Emperor Concerto with the New York Philharmonic. "She inhabits the music with a lived understanding of struggle and triumph that transforms familiar works into profound statements about human resilience." Maya had also begun composing her own music, creating works that drew on her experiences and those of the young people she mentored. Her composition Songs from the Street was a song cycle based on poetry written by foundation participants, combining classical piano with spoken word elements that told stories of hardship and hope. The work premiered at Lincoln Center, with Maya at the piano and Manuel Santos delivering the spoken word portions. The performance was filmed and distributed to schools and community centers nationwide, carrying the message that art could emerge from any circumstance and speak to universal human experiences. Maya's influence extended beyond her direct work with homeless youth. Her story had inspired hundreds of other successful people to examine how they could use their platforms and resources to support young people facing similar challenges. A network of Maya-inspired programs had emerged across the country, creating a movement that addressed youth homelessness through arts-based intervention. Dr. Chen, now in her 70s but still actively involved with the foundation, often reflected on the exponential impact of the decision she had made to approach Maya in that restaurant years earlier. "When I first heard Maya play, I knew she was talented," Dr. Chen said during a foundation board meeting. "But I had no idea that helping her would create ripple effects that would touch thousands of other young lives." The foundation had documented success stories that went far beyond individual achievement. Program alumni had become teachers, social workers, therapists, and advocates, creating their own programs to support at-risk youth. The economic impact was significant too, as young people who had been surviving on government assistance or living on the streets became productive, tax-paying members of society. Maya understood that her story resonated with people because it challenged assumptions about homelessness and potential. Too often, society wrote off young people experiencing crisis as lost causes, failing to recognize the talent and resilience that adversity could develop. "Everyone wants to believe in redemption stories," Maya told a journalism student who was writing her senior thesis about the foundation. "But what people sometimes miss is that these aren't just feel-good stories about individual triumph. They're evidence that we're wasting human potential when we don't invest in young people who are facing challenges." Maya had learned to navigate the complexities of being both an artist and an activist, understanding that her celebrity status carried both privileges and responsibilities. She was careful to use her platform thoughtfully, speaking out on issues related to youth homelessness, arts education funding, and social justice, while maintaining the focus and discipline necessary for her artistic career. Her romantic life had also found stability with Dr. James Mitchell, a pediatric psychiatrist who specialized in trauma treatment for adolescents. They had met at a conference on youth mental health, where Maya was the keynote speaker, and their shared commitment to supporting young people in crisis had formed the foundation of their relationship. James brought his own expertise to Maya's advocacy work, helping the foundation develop more sophisticated approaches to addressing the mental health needs of program participants. His presence in Maya's life provided the kind of steady, supportive partnership that allowed her to pursue her demanding career while maintaining her commitment to service. "Maya carries the weight of hundreds of young people's hopes," James often observed to friends. "She needs someone who understands that responsibility and can help her maintain the balance necessary to sustain both her artistry." Maya's success had also allowed her to reconnect with her brother Carlos, who had spent his teenage years in a series of foster placements after Maya's departure from the system. Carlos, now 22 and working as an elementary school teacher, had struggled with the abandonment he felt when Maya disappeared from his life during her period of homelessness. Their reunion had been emotional and complicated, requiring family therapy sessions to address the trauma both siblings had experienced. But Maya's success had provided resources for Carlos to pursue his own education and career goals, and their relationship had gradually healed as he came to understand the circumstances that had led to their separation. "I used to be angry that Maya left me," Carlos shared during a foundation event, where he spoke about the impact of family separation on youth in foster care. "But now I understand that she didn't choose to leave. The system failed both of us. What Maya has built here ensures that other siblings won't have to face those same separations." As Maya approached her 27th birthday, she reflected on the decade that had passed since she first stood outside Romano's bistro, desperate and hungry. The scared teenager who had begged for a chance to play piano for food had become an internationally recognized artist and advocate, whose influence extended far beyond her individual achievements. The foundation was planning its largest fundraising gala yet, with performances by program alumni who had gone on to successful careers in music, theater, visual arts and writing. Maya would perform alongside young people who were just beginning their journeys out of crisis, creating a powerful demonstration of the continuum from desperation to achievement that the foundation facilitated. But perhaps the most meaningful measure of Maya's success was visible in the daily operations of the Artists in Transition facility, where young people who had once felt hopeless were discovering their own potential and developing the skills necessary to pursue their dreams. Each resident represented not just an individual life transformed, but a future advocate who would carry the message of possibility to other young people facing similar challenges. Maya's story had proven that circumstances don't determine destiny, that talent can survive even the most difficult conditions, and that communities have the power to transform individual lives, and through them, society itself. Her music continued to move audiences worldwide, but her greatest composition was the symphony of hope she had orchestrated through her foundation, creating harmonies of healing that would resonate for generations to come. The girl who had once been refused food had become a feast of opportunity for countless others, proving that when society invests in its most vulnerable young people, the returns extend far beyond anything that could have been imagined. Maya Rodriguez had not just overcome her circumstances, she had transformed them into a force for healing and hope that touched thousands of lives and would continue to expand long after her own story reached its conclusion. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.